So this is something that I heard about a while ago and then recently got brought back up for a few reasons. One, Moist Critical talked about it. Two, I've seen Asmongold talk about it. But I haven't watched either of their videos on it. But I know this movement from a while ago. And the movement goes essentially by the name of Stop Killing Games. And it has to do with always online games eventually going offline and being unable to play them. So I thought we would check it out. I'll give you my take on it. There's some other people involved in it too. Like I think Pirate Software is a big part of it. But yeah, let's see about this.
Yeah, that's right. Spirit Fingers.
See, to me, that means he wants to go. That means he wants, you know, like maybe it's a hockey thing when you like shake your gloves. That means you want to fight. But maybe I'm a little too Canadian here.
Do you know why? Because it's been about 30 hours since I last slept, and I've done 3 different intros, all of which crash and burned, and I am off my gourd, so now I'm going wacko mode. But even in my sleep-deprived state, I am still lucid enough to recognize how cattywampus the AAA gaming space has become. Like,
well,
the
we all
gaming
know it.
industry has so many things that I have bitched and moaned about. Probably the biggest practice that I've been most vocal about, not exactly shy on, is the topic of "you will own nothing and be happy." The Ubisoft motto. God rest that company's soul.
You know what's funny? No one's saying this. Nobody is saying this. This is not the Ubisoft model. And you know what? There's probably a company before this. This is the Netflix model. Because they try to push towards subscription service, which you don't own anything. Right? So before video games started doing this, it was Netflix that pushed this forward. Just saying. Because remember when you used to like go to Best Buy or whatever and buy a season of The Office or buy a season of The Simpsons so that you didn't have to like tune in on TV to watch it? Yeah, that's gone. That's non-existent, and everyone's okay with it for TV, by the way. So eventually everyone's gonna be okay with it for video games as well. Because guess what? The way that copyright works on Netflix, you can buy your subscription to Netflix, but 3 years down the road, if it's not on Netflix, you can't watch that show. Maybe you bought it for that. I mean, the main difference is you can also buy games online, and that's probably what we're talking about here. But anyway,
pile of dog shit. But it's not just Ubisoft. That has become a prevalent business strategy across the gaming industry. You will own nothing. You will be happy. You're basically, you come away with the idea of ownership of whatever games you purchase. I've worn this topic out more than a fleshlight in a frat house, but it is something I am very passionate about. The gaming industry is getting away with more and more garbage where they'll take a shit in your mouth and you're expected to thank them for adding some flavor to your taste buds. It's terrible. And there is an initiative that has been aiming to fight back against a lot of these practices that I think really need some big overhaul. And it's an initiative that I think a lot of you are probably very familiar with. It's called Stop Killing Games. And I've followed it since its inception. I've talked about it on stream quite a few times, though this is my first video going over it. And I regret that now because I see it wasn't going as well as I thought it was. Admittedly, I didn't follow how successful the initiative was, only that it was aiming to do good for consumers, and that it was taking proper steps legally to get there. And it was...
Did they have lawyers? Did they get lawyers?
Going through all of the right channels. And now today I watched a video from the guy that's spearheading this. His name is Ross. He posted a video called The End of Stop Killing Games, where he's giving an update on where everything's at and how it's kind of at the finish line here with a lot of failure to show for it, with only a few other chances to fight back. Now, before getting into the weeds on the topic, I want to get this in the beginning because I imagine the vast majority of people won't watch the whole thing. I'm putting a link to the full video on Stop Killing Games, as well as a link to where you'd go to help support the Stop Killing Games initiative, because there's only a little bit of time left for the most important parts of it now that it's at the end. So if you know what the movement is and want to support it but didn't know where, the resources are in the description, or if you want to get it right from like the source, I have a link to his video. But I want to go into it myself here because it is
I just realized that this is a reaction video. Do a reaction video. That's how you know it's going to be good.
A topic that I do feel very strongly about. But for those that don't know anything about Stop Killing Games, I'm going to let him explain it in his own words. That way you can get an actual, correct, informed explanation of what the initiative is. And the reason I say it like that, kind of like fucking all, pinky
Reacception is correct.
out, snooty, is because a lot of people don't even really know what this is because of people like Pirate Software completely misrepresenting what the initiative was.
Ooh, we're throwing people under the bus. Let's go.
As a refresher, Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement to stop publishers from effectively destroying video games they have already sold to customers.
I'll pause right there. The simplest, bare bones, birthday suit, butt-ass naked explanation for what this is. Stop destroying things that people have paid money to own. I think that is a very understandable, very reasonable take. Very agreeable. Now I want to quickly jump to a different spot in this video.
Okay, so here's the issue, right? This makes complete sense if you are buying something that is not always online. The problem comes in with where things are always online, right? For example, just use Call of Duty. If you bought a Call of Duty game and then the entire Call of Duty game got taken down, there's a problem with that. And that's why some people have a problem with zombies and campaign always being online. But if they took down the servers, you should still be able to play like the single player parts of those games. But the problem is games now are all being run off of the servers and various different things where like texture streaming and things like that. Well, these companies have to pay for the servers to host these kind of things. So there's an ongoing cost with all of these things, but you're not paying a subscription service to it. So it causes a problem. So I think I need a solution, and I hope they give one for how this is solved. And I'm guessing it's going to be games need to stop being always online. But there's also problems with that as well. Like they take more effort to run and things like that. The ease of play is not quite there either. So I'm curious what they say about that.
Because I think it's important to have this in the beginning because it's something a lot of people have heard that comes from someone that is just wrong about it. It's the Pirate Software portion. Ross is addressing the video Pirate Software made many months ago.
Many moons
Ross
ago.
even says that he didn't plan on doing that because he didn't want to be seen as using this for drama farming because it would start to make the movement look less of like a legitimate initiative and more of just like drama slop content type thing. But he finally starts talking about Pirate Software here because it's at the end of the life cycle of this initiative and it's not looking promising, so he's willing to do anything to try and set the record straight and hopefully start getting more momentum back to the movement because the damage Pirate Software did to it through his video was substantial.
This video came out right as we were building momentum. Then except for one boost in Germany, the signatures started drying up like clockwork. Ford does not understand what Stop Killing Games is. Here it is in his words.
So for those who don't understand, the Stop Killing Games initiatives is basically we don't want single-player games
No.
to have DRM that the developers can turn off and thus render the single-player games inactive anymore. This is what they want to change. They need to be specific that they're talking about single-player games that do not need a server to support them.
No.
And as much as they want it to be about specifically games where it is a single-player game that has always online functionality, it would impact every live service game that exists. Instead of just targeting single-player, always online games.
No, that's not what it is. Stop Killing Games includes single-player games, but nothing about it is specific to them. He completely made that up, and I have no idea where he got that impression. It's the first line on the website. Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement started to challenge the legality of publishers destroying video games they have sold to customers. But the movement includes all this stuff from earlier, and he was mostly talking about the initiative.
By the way, just to be clear, this is why I think we will continue to see things like Game Pass, like the Netflix model, like we talked about, because the legality, I could see a lawyer pushing forth the idea that you bought this game, you should be able to play it at all times. Kind of like if you buy a movie, you should be able to play it at all times. Now, things like this get sketchy. Like, for example, I have Amazon Prime. Every Christmas, we watch Elf. So I bought Elf on Prime. It doesn't need to be on their service, but I watch it through there. If Prime ever goes under, I'm not going to have access to Elf. So there's legalities and things like this. And when you check that box and say, I agree to this massive contract that I'm never going to read, you agree to that kind of thing. Now with video games, it's interesting because, as I mentioned, there's servers and everything like that. And gone are the days of owning discs, or pretty close to gone are those days. So it's very confusing. And if this legislation passed and somehow they got it through legally, more and more companies would jump to that subscription model because it's less risky, because you don't have to keep the games up for all of eternity, all of these things. So yeah, I don't think there is just like an easy answer to that.
He didn't even get the Cliff Notes summary right. He missed all the QT.
When a company goes under, they would sell their rights of ownership to somebody else, wouldn't they? Who's going to want to just host a Elf, for example, that's going to cost them servers and they get nothing out of it because I've already bought it? Why would someone else get the rights to that?
And got the bad ending on understanding the initiative from the jump here. Ross is correct. This has nothing to do with just single player only games that require an online connection, that when the online connection is severed, you lose access to the game. Like, yeah, that is included in all of this, but that's not like what the whole movement is about. And for some reason, Pirate Software is stun locked on that, like fixated as if that is the actual like meat and potatoes of Stop Killing Games. They need to be more specific in their language about it being single player, always online connectivity games, when that's just not what it's about. Like, they're not being specific about that because that is not what they are specifically targeting. It is about the whole practice of destroying games that consumers have already purchased and having no end-of-life plans for games that are being sunset. So, for example,
yeah, and I agree with that.
The Crew. The Crew is an example everyone is going to reference and talk about because Ubisoft is still currently in a lawsuit battling against it for what happened with this game. I've yapped about it quite a bit, so I'm not just going to regurgitate that.
Which, by the way, what ends up happening with that lawsuit will be very important for video games.
A lot of you already know the story about it. But basically, you buy The Crew, Ubisoft pulls the plug on the servers, you can't play The Crew anymore. Now it's just an
Picture X Defiant if you had to pay for it.
Old wet dream of what once was. And they are facing a lawsuit. And while this is in the umbrella of Stop Killing Games, it is not the only thing Stop Killing Games is referencing when it comes to this practice. Pirate Software is so hung up on it being single-player games that people lose access to, when that is a component of it, but not the entire focus.
Well, the short version is the initiative is about requiring publishers to have end-of-life plans for games they've sold to customers in the future. So when they shut them down, customers can continue running them without their support. So that's one thing Thor doesn't understand, but he also seems to think this is about converting multiplayer games to single player.
Transitioning an entire multiplayer server-side game into a single-player video game, which means rebalancing the entire experience around single player, rebuilding everything in the entire game.
I think they're both actually kind of missing the plot on this one. Somehow I'm going to choose neither of them as the correct option, because you're not going to make a multiplayer game into a single player game like Thor's saying. Like, you're just not. But that's also not what Ross is saying. What he's saying is that they need an end of life agreement where someone can come in and essentially pay for the servers for everyone else to play. I don't see that system working either. And this is what I said at the very beginning. I don't see a good solution to this, because you can't expect a company to build something and support it for years and then it just not be worth it to the company anymore. So they say, okay, we can't support this anymore. What's the right option? I see why he's getting caught up on the single player games, because he's a game developer, and the only type of game where you could sunset without costing any money is a single player experience that you can just download and have it on a hard drive or whatever. As soon as there's servers involved, there's a cost involved with that. And I don't know an answer to that. I'm not smart enough to know an answer to that.
You're going to do that with Final Fantasy 14. You're just going to make all the raids soloable? Imagine the day that World of Warcraft shuts down, and suddenly you have to make it a single-player game for every individual that ever bought the game. That's what they're asking for.
No.
Because they would
They're
have
asking another way for the servers to be live is what they're actually asking for.
to sunset live service games as a single-player experience. The idea that suddenly...
No, Kev. You said, but Ink, you know everything. I do not know everything. I act like I know everything. Very big difference.
You need to make every single live service game playable single-player offline? No, dude.
Correct. No.
This part is more confusing than Finnegan's Wake, because nowhere in anything on Stop Killing Games has this even been like a talking point from anyone besides Pirate Software. I don't know where he pieced this puzzle together. Like
I said, because he's a developer and he's thinking that's the only way that this is possible.
Like I don't get it. Like if I'm gonna try and like really reach here and give like a charitable explanation for this take, maybe he's extrapolating based on the idea that if publishers have to have end-of-life plans for their games, that includes MMOs, where once the game is getting sunset, you're pulling the plug on it, you would then need to turn the game over to the community in a playable state, an accessible state, like give the code to them. Thus, it'd turn it into a single-player experience, so the onus would be on the developers to rebalance their game to be a single-player experience for them. I guess. I have no idea. That still just doesn't make any sense, but maybe that's the tree he's barking up with that thought process. I really don't know, because Stop Killing Games at no point ever says any of these multiplayer games need to be converted to single player. That really is outlandish. And the more I think about it, like the more nonsensical it becomes, because even in Pirate Software's hypothetical fanfic there, why would the developers need to rebalance the game? They would just turn over the code to the community and just it'd be in that state. They're no longer responsible for balancing the game. That's the whole point. They're not indefinitely supporting it. They would just be responsible of leaving the game in an accessible state to the community while they would shut down the servers on their end. Like they wouldn't need to go back.
So essentially what they're saying, I think, is if you're going to shut down the game, you need to make the game playable to people. So basically putting the open access code to anyone so that it is now copyright free. You're allowed to host your own game or build your own game off of that code, which actually is a pretty decent solution. Because then if people want to play the game, you can either build your own servers on it or pay someone to do so. And then it's no longer on the onus of that company, but they've also given up the rights to it. So say, for example, Blizzard gives up World of Warcraft because people aren't playing it anymore. They put the code out there, someone boots up another server, it gets massively successful. Blizzard can't come in and be like, no, that's our game. No, you've given up on it at that point. It's essentially what they want.
Through with a whole development team and like, you know, tweak the game to be single player compatible. It just doesn't make sense. Like I really do not understand that one. But apparently a lot of people latched on to that talking point from Pirate Software as something that Stop Killing Games was asking for and how unreasonable it was. Which, if that's what Stop Killing Games was asking for, it would be unreasonable. But that's not what it's asking for.
Nowhere in there does it say that it's directly targeting always online single player games.
Oh, he's so close. He's so close to getting it.
It is vague, and because of that, it will impact.
He never has that light bulb moment. Well, he is correct in that statement. It's almost as if that's not what the initiative is asking for.
I know this part is once again just reinforcing that
actually
he
pretty
doesn't
funny.
know what the Stop Killing Games movement is about, but I have to just show you this because it is so fascinating, because he himself literally calls out that Stop Killing Games at no point explicitly mentions single-player always online games or anything like that. And for some reason, instead of following the breadcrumbs that would naturally lead him to the conclusion of, oh, maybe I misunderstood, maybe because it's absent here, that's not what this is actually about. Instead, he uses it as a criticism against the Stop Killing Games initiative entirely, saying it's just too vague, it's way too vague. The reason it is not explicitly stated there is because that is not what the whole initiative is about. It is not specifically targeting that thing that you keep saying that it is. I don't know how that never clicked.
But those were his streams with a smaller audience. What does he say in his big YouTube video with over 1 million views that he had time to research?
If we're trying to kill off the practice of Developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single-player experience, and then taking away support in the future.
Now he's changed it again and is making up how it's about single-player games are advertised. What is he doing?
It needs to be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not necessary and doesn't.
Okay, so I actually understand this now. I didn't understand this when we started out. I actually understand this now. He's basically saying that if you're not going to support your IP that people have paid for, you need to give up that code so people can still play it. And like you're essentially, if you're giving up on that, you're giving up the rights to earn money off of it. And I think that is fair, right? Like that's actually a pretty fair statement. Now, will that ever happen? No, because that's not how copyright law works, unfortunately. There is now, if you really want to get into this, I don't know the exact numbers, but I happen to know that after a certain amount of time, I want to say it's 75 years. I have no idea where that number's coming from though. Say for example, I believe it's Beethoven, right? He wrote his music long enough ago that there is now no longer a copyright on that music. Now, if you really want to go down the weeds, I believe his family or people who are under him can technically either pay or do something to extend the copyright on it. So copyright laws are shit, is essentially what I'm getting at. Like they're just horrible. So this movement, the way that it is, I don't think will ever pass, even though I think it, with what I now understand they're saying, is completely reasonable.
At any gameplay elements. That's the problem.
No, that's not it at all.
This is a really strong section from Ross here because the clips that you saw moments ago were from his stream. When he took more time to watch it and digest it, he still came back in that video misrepresenting it. Like, it never dawned on him. Like, on stream, he could write it off as like, oh, he didn't grasp it in the moment, maybe later on he did. Well, then he made the video where he still was talking about things that are just not what Stop Killing Games was about, and this was the one that really blew up and really started to kind of dismantle the Stop Killing Games momentum.
If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms.
No, he's getting a new thing wrong now. We're not against them existing. We're against them being destroyed with no recourse for the customer.
Pirate Software then goes on to talk about like the business practice of misleading consumers into thinking that what they're buying is a product as opposed to a license to a product, which is a totally separate thing. And then he criticizes Stop Killing Games for not being specific about that thing that he is bringing up, as opposed to what Stop Killing Games is talking about. So he's using that against them for some reason. And then Ross goes into like the license talk.
Our problem is not with licenses failing to inform people. Blizzard says they can take away your purchase for no reason. That sounds pretty clear to me. Our problem is those terms are so hostile to consumers and the medium that they should be taken off the table entirely. This needs regulation. Forget video games. If you look at basic commerce for hundreds of years, when you paid money, you either got to keep what you paid for, or if it was a service, you were told when your access ends.
Yeah, so this is the thing, right? This doesn't include anything online. And laws very clearly at this point are not made for internet. Like the way that laws are written do not include the internet. And I guess what this comes down to is these laws need to be rewritten. And honestly, the company that's doing the best for that is Steam. Steam is the one like on the forefront pushing forward these things getting put into legislation, putting onto paper, pen to paper, that kind of thing. And it needs to be done. The problem is it hasn't and probably isn't going to anytime soon because the people who are enforcing the laws don't understand it still.
Vast majority of online-only games do neither of those.
He's exactly right. That is a huge problem. Now, Pirate Software is correct here about these companies that will mislead consumers through this fraudulent advertising on what you're actually buying, because in a lot of cases, you don't own any of the shit that you're buying. It is pretty much a rental. You get
Wait. It still costs money to make the game offline. Unless gamers pay for the game to be remade offline, then the company shouldn't have to be responsible when most games are a failure and people lose interest. So I get what you're saying, but basically what the movement, from what I understand, is saying is that, say, take Call of Duty Black Ops 6, for example, just the multiplayer of it. If they were to stop supporting that game, you would obviously no longer have access to it. What people are saying is when the company does that, they release the code so that I, Ink Slasher, could take said code and then reboot my own server with it or do my own thing with it, copyright free, and be able to not necessarily profit from it, because I don't know how that part works, but at least be able to support play for it. But again, nothing ever exists like this for copyright law. So that's why nothing like this will ever get solved anytime soon. The company just releasing the code would cost them nothing or next to nothing.
Permission slip to access the content, that is an issue, and not making it abundantly clear to consumers that that is what you are buying is a problem. And so too is the actual agreements, as Ross demonstrates with Blizzard, where it says they can just completely terminate it for no reason at all. It really does go against the basic idea of commerce entirely. Video games are in a totally different ball game when it comes to that, because half the time you don't realize that you're just buying an admission ticket to a game. You're not actually buying the game.
It is a good point, though. The more that I think about it, like I guarantee you Amazon, there's something in the contract that I signed for that says if Amazon goes offline, my online purchases are gone. Do any video games say that? Like if our company goes bankrupt, the game will no longer be supported. Is that in any of the ULAs?
Also don't know how long that's going to last. Again, to go back to Concord, that shit lasted less than a fucking rainstorm, basically. Like there is just so many problems. So I don't know why Pirate Software would be so harsh on Stop Killing Games for not addressing specific things that he himself is bringing up or making up in regards to it. It just doesn't compute. It really is a video that did significant damage to an actually positive initiative that aimed to help consumers in the video game space. All based on his complete misrepresentation of it, which was a complete mess.
If you try to tell me that every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them.
Oh, no!
Well, first of all, that could be good. But also, no. If it's just saying, yeah, he's lost the plot. I can't
He
even...
wheeled out that line about publishers having to support the game forever. He was literally watching the video earlier where it says it won't do that in big letters. That wasn't enough. We just can't stop gamers from going there, even when we spell it out.
That's the last clip I want to show from this section on the Pirate Software video, but it's a very important one because this is something a lot of people also think the Stop Killing Games initiative is about, where developers, publishers will have to support their games forever. Like, until the fucking heat death of the universe, they'll have to support these games under the initiative. When that is not the case. It is very simply asking that when the game has reached the end of its life cycle, the publishers, developers don't want to work on it any longer, to turn it over to the community to still be in a playable, accessible state so the product can still exist. There is some more nuance, obviously, to how that works, given like publisher developer licensing and a lot of like the code, the binary, that kind of thing. There is a lot at play under the hood there, of course, but it is something that Stop Killing Games isn't naive to, and it is something that is talked about. But I'm not going to dive too deep into it. I encourage you to check more in on it. But this whole belief that it is about endlessly supporting a live service game, even when it makes no sense to do so and it's beyond dead and in the dirt, is ridiculous, because that is not what it is asking for. And a lot of people think that it is. It's not. Pirate Software got that wrong as well. Anyway, I'll stop yapping about it, but as mentioned in the beginning, most of Stop Killing Games hasn't been successful in getting change. And Ross has dedicated
I think there's a reason for that, by the way. I'll knock on that before the end, but
much of his life to this, and it's clearly taken a big toll. Now he's doing everything he can for this last ditch push to try and help. And there are two big things coming up that can do so.
Okay.
And it's what I linked at the very beginning of the at the very beginning of the video about the resources in the description. It's in regards to this.
One is for the UK to sign a government petition to bring this issue before Parliament. Though, keeping it real, I'm not terribly optimistic about this one, since the government response has been a mess by every definition. But the one that has a lot of power, so much so I think it could change the course of gaming history, is the European Citizens Initiative. Now, I said I'm approaching this like a time traveler because with the trajectory we're on, these are both going to fail. Again, this one is crazy powerful, but the hurdle we just couldn't get past was that it requires 1 million signatures from citizens of EU countries. And we've only made it just under halfway. What a lot of people don't realize is that in the EU especially, it's almost a state of lawlessness regarding the practice of game destruction. Is that the vast majority of games with an online requirement say they can be terminated at any time for any
of course
reason.
It's Ubisoft.
Or Blizzard likes to say any or no reason. But according to the EU Commission, that might be a violation of Directive 93/13 EEC, which protects consumers against unfair terms in consumer contracts. So if that term is
basically, it's a big mess and will remain that way.
unfair, that means that part of the contract is null and void.
He goes on to explain how powerful that can be because of what a mess that is. Because there is so much gray area with how the video games currently operate in regards to those protections, it would be a legal headache that would require an analysis of the laws or implementation of new laws that could lead to, hopefully, an improvement when it comes to gaming. So the big hurdle was the signatures, needing 1 million, and currently it's at like 460,000, so it doesn't reach the threshold. I've been very vocal from the very beginning about how little faith I have in petitions, but that's just from the perspective of an American. In America, petitions are more worthless than toilet paper. You're better off just writing what you want on a note to Santa Claus and shipping it to the North Pole than you are doing anything with a petition in this country. I don't know how different it is in the EU. Maybe it really is this powerful there that could lead to substantial change and improvement when it comes to games and preservation and all of what we've already talked about. Hopefully, I mean, that's really all that's left for the Stop Killing Games.
So here's the thing. Here is like the honest, like to goodness take on this. It's a good movement and it's a good thing and it's a reasonable idea. Nothing is going to come of this movement for one reason and one reason alone. And I think Thor was trying to say this, but I agree, got caught up on many things. It's pretty plain and simple. To do something like this legally, you have to be specific on every front, but not just specific to me. Like, not just saying single player games, not just saying always online single player games, not just saying, you would have to have a line basically delegating every single way that a game works and saying what companies specifically would have to do for them in those situations in order for a law to even be considered for any of it. Otherwise, it's just jargon and it's never going to be looked at seriously. So a lawyer who understands internet, who understands video games, would have to go in extreme depth doing this. And I just don't think that's there with the movement, unfortunately. So maybe one day this does get eventually looked at, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. And when it does, the devs, I almost guarantee you, are just going to push further in the way of subscription model, because then in subscription model, as soon as you stop paying, that's gone. And then they can do the thing like they do with Netflix, where things are just randomly removed based off of other sort of contracts. I guarantee you this is the way that video games are going. I guarantee it. And it's going to suck. It's not consumer friendly whatsoever.